Welcome to Watch World with Faye, a new podcast in the watch and lifestyle space. I'm your host, Faye Soteri. I've been in the industry for over 20 years and I've been lucky enough to work with the people behind the brands, from some incredible independents and micro brands to the Goliaths. One thing that I've noticed as a common theme is every brand has its own unique story. Please enjoy our premiere episode. We've been lucky enough to film at Woodbury House, an incredible art gallery in Mayfair. And my thanks go to Steve Sully for hosting us. Jonny Garrett, it is brilliant to see you again. It's been a while since we last met. You are the creator, founder and CEO of William Wood Watches. We've met a few times during our rich and vast watch career. I've slept away slightly in it and in different guise, and I'm absolutely thrilled for you to be my first guest on Watch World Pod. Your brand is one of authenticity, creativity, it's ingenious, and it's got wonderful storytelling and heritage. I love the narrative to it, and I've been lucky enough to meet with you a few times over the years. I can't do it justice in terms of the brand itself and telling the story, so please, why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about the William Wood brand.
Thanks so much, and it's great to be one of the first guests on the podcast as well, Faye. I am the founder of William Wood Watches. For the viewers who don't know, William Wood was the name of my late grandfather. He served in the British Fire Service for over 25 years, so he was stationed up in Newcastle. He was a massive role model in my life. Sadly, he passed away in 2009. My grandmother, Joyce Wood, is actually still alive at 93, which is unbelievable. And every one of our watches are dedicated to him and firefighters internationally. So we produce all of our watches from genuine upcycled firefighter equipment, where we take a 100-year-old British brass firefighter's helmet, melt it down, turn it into the watch case, and all of the straps are made from genuine upcycled fire hose. So something that I'm probably most proud of is the fact that we've donated over £150,000 now to firefighters and their families around the world.
Gosh, so philanthropy is a really big part of your story and the brand. I didn't realise your grandmother was still alive. She must be pleased as punch and so proud of you for what the endeavours that you've done and how far you've come with the brand.
She really is, yeah. I mean, she actually wears the one of our watches, specifically the Peacock edition from our dress watch range. So whenever I go back up there or we're sat around the Christmas table, obviously she's always asking about William Wood in her sort of husband's honour. And she's wearing the watch as well, which is really quite special. But it's special to the entire family, Faye. I mean, imagine having such an instrumental man that was in our family on the dial of every watch. Everybody wants to know within the family how things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you already interested in watches before you created the brand? And was it a combination of the two that led you down the William Wood path?
So for me, which is always quite an interesting one, I would say I was more passionate about luxury craftsmanship. So yes, I appreciate watches because at the end of the day, especially men, they don't really have a way to be able to show their personality apart from possibly through a watch, clothing or a car. But for me, it was more so seeing how luxury products and brands were taking maybe 3 to 12 months to produce something that had many different components, and this beautiful instrument would come out at the end. And every time I was trying to think of ideas of what to do in honor of my grandfather, this sort of vision board and mood board that I had kept coming back to watches. Now, if I had much deeper pockets, I probably would have set up a supercar company, but I didn't have the funding to do that, so I decided with watches, and it's just been a really beautiful journey over the last 8 years.
Okay, so the 8 years, when was so conceptually it started 8 years ago?
Yes.
Or production started? Because you've come a really long way. We'll talk about where your points of sale are, where you stocked, which countries, how you communicate, what your preferred channels are, because I know you do a lot of D2C and work with retailers. So I want to know where the brand is now, where it's going, but yeah. I'm quite interested. You've told us where it's come from.
You are right, Faye. 8 years has flown by, and I may make it sound like it was a very sort of straight line journey, but it certainly wasn't. So if you cast your mind back all the way back to 2017, I was actually working in a bank. Okay, so you start to realize that if you don't own your own thing and have your own company, there are many blockages in the way of ultimately your full potential. So what I did, I went home that night and I started sort of drawing up different ideas. And it wasn't until Boxing Day 2017, when I was actually in a Wetherspoons pub in my local village in Hexham, that I had a conversation with a friend. And he told me about a crowdfunding platform called Kickstarter. And this was a way that you could come with an idea with a product. You could produce a video, images, and basically customers could come to your page and they could pre-order your product. And for me, it was like fireworks going off in my mind. And that night is when I went to my family home in Hexham. I actually burst into tears because it was the moment for me that I realized that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And from there forward, every single day for the last 8 years, I've just been so committed and focused to this project. I grew it outside of the bank. It took me 5 years of working in the bank, 5 years just to reinforce that point. And when I got to the 5-year stage, it was the easiest transition to be able to quit, because I could have left 3 years earlier, but I didn't. I waited, I stuck it out, and then I've been full-time self-employed now for the last 3 years.
Firstly, congratulations, that's really inspiring. And it also resonates because you and I had a conversation about this. You were really supportive of this, you know, as I said, this is you're my first guest. I was floating the idea, I wanted to speak to a few people in the industry. I'd had a brilliant career as a watch buyer globally for 20 years, and I didn't have a situation like you where I was sort of, it wasn't a top 5% conversation, but 20 years was a long time, and I didn't really know where my next stages were. And so I took a really big risk and took a step aside, and didn't really think I wanted to go back into corporate. Didn't think I needed the watch industry, but I took some time out, and then I was wrong. I was like, I miss my watches, and I miss the people, and I miss the stories. So we'd had a couple of conversations, and I had that moment after speaking to you, when we'd had a couple of conversations, and I was just blown away. I was like, right, this is what I want to do. And then I was like questioned, would you talk with me? You know, absolutely, I'll be your first guest. Sure. So firstly, congratulations. And I feel I'd love to know who the chap was who said, no, Jonny can't be part of that 5%, because he's still working for somebody else and you're not. So it's a beautiful story. And I think it's a real, it's really inspiring for people to take a step away from something that was probably very financially secure and stable, and for you to then take the risk and do something that you're clearly very passionate about. Mm-hmm. So 8 years on, I don't want to harp on too much about that because I find it fascinating, but the brand is doing so much. Yeah. Last time we spoke, well, why don't you tell me what on that timeline where you are now, and then I want to talk a little bit about where you're planning to go.
Of course, yeah. So where we are now, I would really position us in probably the top 5 independent watchmakers in Great Britain. We pride ourselves on calling ourselves a family-run watchmaker, because at the end of the day as well, I have hired some family members who now work within the company too. And the beauty of what we do, Faye, is the fact that we have no investors, we have no debt, we have nobody to answer to. So it means we can be as agile as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're making watches that are inspired by everything that you would possibly see in the fire industry. Whether it be a fire exit sign, whether it be fire extinguishers, fire sprinklers. So you've got to make sure that it can be luxury and possibly not tacky. And this is the challenge that you always have to do, is how do you get really close to that line to make sure that it's quirky and unique, but luxury at the same time. So I'd say our design over the last 8 years has really advanced from, in year 1, we produced a dress watch, which was a quartz watch called our Chivalrous collection. That was the first watch that we launched on a crowdfunding platform. And really now we've built up our collections into some really, really award-winning, impressive pieces. The watch that I'm wearing today, for instance, this is our Swiss-made chronograph series. We launched this one in 2021, and the people that are wearing these watches around the world now, we've got Russell Crowe, who owns one of these watches. Kevin O'Leary has one of these watches. The famous comedian Pete Davidson, who sadly lost his father in 9/11, he's got one of our watches now. So it just shows really from the person in year one who was working for the bank, trying like hell to get this message out there, to where we are now. It's been quite a remarkable journey. We obviously have a stockist network as well. So I would say about 99% of our revenue is D2C. The other elements are through retailers and stockists. But a really beautiful part of the business, which is just soaring into 2025, is actually business to business, where big fire industry companies are now coming to us. Let's say they've got 7 to 30,000 employees, and they can actually purchase watches from us to celebrate the 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25 year milestones. And in the back of the watch it says, thank you for your 15 years of service. Which is instrumental if you think about it, Faye, because rather than having to get individual sales through the website, if you're getting an order of 1,000 watches for a fire company, it's something that we'd overlooked, but we're thinking, God, we're one of the only watchmakers in the world to do what we do. That's such a cool route to go down.
Well, it was not only a cool route, it's lovely that such a important role in any community is recognised. I'm pretty sure you didn't get a watch for 15 years at the bank.
No.
But that goes back to the agility of your brand, the fact that you said you've got no investors, it's completely independent. Do you find that helps with the creativity element of the brand, because you haven't got to worry about you can push your own boundaries and be loyal to your own product and your own DNA? And I think it's comes back to that piece on being authentic. And it was really interesting you used the word gimmick, because in the 20 years I'd worked in the watch industry, there were several brands that I was introduced to that had were great themes or thematic, but they did feel a little bit gimmicky. And I remember the first time I ever was introduced to your brand and your team, we were at Watch Pro.
Yes.
And I was fascinated by the brand. Gave me a great introduction. Wasn't ready to take it on where I was working at the time. And then a year later, I was back with a colleague, and I was like, I remember this brand. You've got to go and speak to them, because by this stage I was looking after North America, so I couldn't have any influence over the purchasing. And I was giving them an overview, and I glanced up. I didn't realise we were in earshot, and you were grinning because I was giving her an overview of the product, the history from what I'd retained. And
That's great.
I don't always retain a lot of information, unfortunately. And I was a bit nervous. Oh no, have I done them a disservice? And then you're like, no, carry on. Just it was. But then I that proceeded for you to continue, because it is authentic. That it isn't a gimmick, and I love the creativity. And in an industry that is fiercely traditional, you've combined all of those elements beautifully. It's credible. It's authentic. It's it's true to the narrative that you first set out to do.
For sure.
And you're going, as you said, you didn't even think about the B2B, retailers and direct to clients at watch fairs and online, but it's now I'm not going to say it's expanding, it's exploding.
It is, yeah, exactly. It's like, excuse the pun, the match is lit now, but to explain that story, when I met you at Watch Pro as well, I think this is important for any listener who's maybe wanted to set up their own company too. You came walking around, and I could tell by your presence that you were an important person in the industry, because we'd never met before. And I clocked you and I thought, I need to get this person's attention. And it was as you were walking past, I grabbed your attention, explained the story. And from there, as you say, at the next show, the relationship developed, and that allowed us to be able to be a stockist in what is one of the most prestigious retailers in the world. So it just goes to show, if you're wanting to set up your own company as well, you've got to take the bull by the horns. As soon as you see an opportunity that could just physically walk by, and you have to try and grab those people's attention, because it's not easy, Faye,
Well, that was something else that I wanted to ask. What are the biggest personal challenges of you doing this, but also what are the largest professional challenges, and breaking into the industry, because with the background that I had, it was with a very well-established, one of the best watch retailers, as you said, globally.
Yeah.
And smaller, independent, slightly lesser unknown, with all due respect, brands they're not always at the forefront for a commercial business. Now, I've got different ideas about that and different thoughts, but when you're working for a big company, that's that's not part, that wasn't part of my role necessarily. So firstly, what were the biggest personal challenges? And then I want to know what the biggest challenges about you breaking into this industry, because I think you pushed some boundaries.
For sure. I mean, the biggest personal challenge that I don't think founders talk about enough is what is the impact that it has on your personal relationships when you absolutely knock it in every day for 2 years solid, holding down a really important job anyway in the city, coming home, opening up your laptop and just going 100 miles an hour at your brand. The first 2 years, it really had an impact on me and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And I don't think people talk about it enough. There's this hustle mentality. But at the same time, if you put too much of your effort into work, other things are going to drop in your life, whether it be your relationships, your family, your fitness, your diet, everything. And that was something which was really, really tough. I think in the early years, I had a constant struggle with putting too much, all of my eggs into just the one basket. Because when you put your grandfather's name on the dial, or somebody that you care and love for, the passion just oozes out of you. I could have worked and just not slept for 2 years. What's the sort of unslept version of Jonny turning up to his girlfriend who just isn't half as committed as he was 2 years before? And I think people need to sort of normalize and talk about it a lot more, where you have to try and get the balance right. So I think personally, that was the biggest challenge that I faced. Professionally, it's, for me, all about marketing. And I think it links back to what I said earlier about grabbing your attention at the show. It's almost like every day you have to have this big sort of megaphone, and you have to be trying to capture as many people's attention about your story as possible. And you said something really interesting at the start. At the end of the day, what sells your product is the story. Whenever budding entrepreneurs come to me and they've got the most incredible product in the world, I can see it's a great product, but I'm more interested in what's the story. How do you reach through the screen and resonate and really touch the heartstrings? That's one of the most difficult things. And how have we done that? It's really by leading with that storytelling element over the last 8 years. At the end of the day, you don't have to buy our watches because you've had a member of your family who's been a firefighter, but you can just connect and resonate with maybe a parent, a brother, a sister, a grandparent. It might be firefighting, it might be military, it might be paramedics, fire and rescue, it could be anything. Sometimes it's even the Newcastle routes. The amount of expats that have left Newcastle and gone to Australia or Canada or the US and just want to have a connection to the Northeast. Because I don't really know of any other big Northeast-based British watchmaker that's doing what we're doing. So people who leave the UK certainly always want to try and find a bit of that British heritage because they miss home, and you'll find they buy a lot of British products. Imagine
you're becoming quite important to the US market as well then, because they love everything, sorry to generalize, anything sort of British. I'd like to actually just go back to something you said about the storytelling and the importance of why you're doing this. How hard is it for you then as a founder and CEO, as your business grows, to allow other people to communicate your message? Because you're the best person to do it.
It's one of the hardest things. And I'll be honest, especially when you work with retailers and they have all these brands that they're stocking and they carry your little baby, okay, and you present your message in a certain way, and all of a sudden you see an email that's gone out and it's just written in a tone of voice that has absolutely nothing to do with your brand. And it's more corporate rather than authentic. It's like a dagger through the heart, if I'm being honest. And I think the challenge is, as a founder, is people say try not to get too emotionally attached to your business. And as I've aged, because also, let's be honest, when I started the company, Faye, I was only 25, I'm 33 now. So you age as a person, you mature as a person. So there are times in the earlier years where you may act irrationally or emotionally because you're associated to something which is your blood, and you just become, I think, a more wise and knowledgeable businessman or woman over the years. But in answer to your question, extremely difficult. You have to give clear guidelines, clear direction, clear tone of voice, and if you can, try and sense check any of the material that any partner or supplier is going to push out there.
Yeah, I love that. So your patina has changed, same as on the bronze watches.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. I've aged.
We all do. Yeah. Well, we do. We've all got a bit more mileage, but I think it fascinates me because it's so personal. However, as a commercial business that you're growing, that narrative is so important. And I wonder if you've that's where you've answered the question, but if you come across situations where the message just isn't there, and I think that's again why you were one of the first people I wanted to speak to, and why I always talk about the brand, because it's just a delight, and storytelling is important. It's the authenticity. Things resonate for different people for different reasons, but if I look at sort of my own personal friend network, those that are the most important to me are the ones that are the most authentic, and then certainly not everyone's cup of tea. But so again, I suppose that's a little bit why William Wood resonates with me.
But we all need that, even in our professional and personal lives. At the end of the day, you don't want somebody to be wearing a mask in front of you and telling you what you want to hear. And as you say, normally these people stand out from the crowd because they are willing to tell the truth. They're sometimes labeled as mavericks. My wife says some crazy stuff, but at least she says the truth. It may hurt, but at least it's truthful. And I think that's a real sign of authenticity.
Yeah, it's important. During those 8 years, how have you seen the industry change?
There's a lot more brands out there.
Yeah.
So when we were starting out in 2017, I found that we could really carve our own niche. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a really strong niche anyway. There's nobody really who's doing what we're doing. But there was just a lot less competition. Now, I find every time I jump onto social media, there is a brand new company which is normally releasing its first collection, doing it in the way that we did our first collection on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Crowdcube. And I'll be honest, I can usually tell in the first 10 seconds whether it's going to last past 2 years or not. You can just tell straight away. You can tell if something's just white labeled with no thought gone behind it and looks like every other watch in the industry, or whether it's actually got a real point of difference and unique selling point. And I think in this industry, if you're not coming with a really strong USP, you're going to struggle. And also, if you look at sort of pre-2017, there was a lot of fashion watches, big company, if you remember, like Daniel Wellington. Yeah. That kind of fashion brand, I think, is just not completely gone, but almost close to dead. I think people now want to see genuine individualism, because at the end of the day, Faye, as well, like, our watches aren't cheap. I've got a watch here which can run up to £4,000, which again, it depends on what you derive as value. £4,000 in somebody's watch collection might not even get the entry watch. But for somebody who's a collector of independent watches, a £4,000 watch is usually at the upper end of the spectrum. And our entry-level watch retails for £800, because we have to make sure that we can be affordable always to firefighters and first responders, but also serve the more luxury watch enthusiasts too. So over that time period, it's got a lot more competitive, and you just need to have a really strong point of difference.
So you're seeing a lot more independent watch brands. You're not seeing them all stand the test of time. So
yeah.
Okay.
And you can read between the lines there. So the people that aren't standing the test of time, or are but just treading water, because sometimes it's a race to the bottom as well. They have to really think about what's their story, what's their point of difference. At the end of the day, people's attention span, especially on social media, is getting smaller and smaller. So how do you make sure that you can grab somebody's attention within
7 seconds, isn't it?
7 seconds, yeah. And if you can't, you're gone.
Yeah. With that, and perhaps it's not just your experience, it might be advice to other small watch brands that are trying to break into the industry. What were your biggest challenges in the industry breaking into? Because I'm assuming your agility has allowed you to. Some people wouldn't want to do the B2B element, whereas that agility that you've spoken about has given you the opportunity to. And one, it raises awareness. Two, it's going back into the cause for where it all started. It's a beautiful sort of 360 synergy and energy. but the challenges are for you.
I think the one that people don't talk about enough is finance. You know, how do you go from your job at the minute to thinking, right, I'm going to build one of Britain's biggest luxury watchmakers? How on earth do I go from my desk in my corporate job or as a car mechanic or working in this patisserie or boulangerie to where I want to go next? So to take a step back, I invested about £20,000 of my own money into the business. That was my own savings to get the business from the point at which it was prototypes in my hand, website all built, images all shot, promotional video ready to go, and a completed Kickstarter page. It's not a lot, you know? If you think about the numbers that you see in revenue terms to run a luxury watch company, if you can save that kind of money up, or if you can take a loan from a bank, you can have the opportunity to be able to break into something that may be a very, very high barrier for entry. Because I would also say, I think the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower and lower now, which is the reason why so many people are trying to set up their own watch companies and why there's so much competition. Because you have such an easy access point from the Western world into places like Hong Kong and China, and also into Switzerland. You know, there's platforms like Alibaba. You can even turn up at a watch show. Normally in the back section of a watch show, they'll actually have the manufacturers there where you can actually meet and look in the whites of the eyes of the factory owners. And let's be honest as well, they're taking a risk on you. So you have to come prepared with a dossier and exactly why they want to take a risk on, I don't know, producing 300 or 500 minimum order quantity on whatever your watch dream is. So I think the first thing is finances. The second thing is, oh God, as much as I hate social media and I'm quite a private person, you have to be putting yourself out there so much. So if you're not posting on social media really 3 to 4 times a week about your brand, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to grow the business. I found that there was moments where I fell in love with social media and other moments where I was really struggling with it. But you have to get into your own cadence and you have to be posting at least 3 to 4 times a week. Otherwise, how on earth are you going to build any kind of customer database at all? And I think the last hack I would say as well, if you want to accelerate the growth of your brand very quickly, find charities or organizations who want to support your cause. So if you want to get plastics out of oceans, or if you want to give back to the military, or in my case, to firefighters, don't forget that there are organizations out there that may have 100 years of history on you, and they might have an emailing list of customers who are super passionate about giving back to your sector, with hundreds of thousands to maybe millions of people on there. And if you build a rapport at the click of a button, they could reach more people than you could dream of in 20 years of building your company. And that can accelerate the growth of your company outrageously. And going back to what you said earlier, how did we get from where we were to where we are now 8 years later? It's because of that charitable cause. We've been working with some of the biggest firefighting charities in the world, and they can reach many firefighters serving, retired, or just wealthy individuals that want to give back to firefighting. And that's how we've been able to accelerate our growth so quickly without debt and investors.
Outrageous, great word. I think you've also got tenacity as you've continued, and there are different components here, aren't there? What was the reaction when you started and you spoke directly to the firefighting communities? Because it clearly wasn't just, this isn't just a commercial business for you to put on, you know, for your former colleagues over at the bank to have a William Wood.
Yeah.
I imagine, was it open arms, or were they quite confused by it? Because it's not something that we really see.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other products that might have a very strong connection, but it's, I don't know, what was the reaction to that community?
They love William Wood watches because there are so few private companies that are doing anything in the world to help promote and give back to firefighters. And if they are fair, it's usually a little pin or a t-shirt with a crest or a cap. But to get a luxury watch that you can wear for the rest of your life and hand down for generations to come, that can compete with some of the best Swiss luxury brands in the world and donate back to firefighters and be made from the actual materials that they use in their job, We believe that we have the greatest luxury product on the planet for a firefighter, full stop, period. We know we do, and it's quite a unique position to be in, because what that then does is it gives us a real place at the table when we are trying to give back to firefighters, or even shape conversations as to standing up for firefighters in certain scenarios. As a private luxury company, you would think that we wouldn't have a say, but we really do, because firefighters are really proud of what we do. At the end of the day, if we can be written about in Forbes, the New York Times, Business Insider, The Guardian, The Observer, The Telegraph, we can talk about firefighting to people who maybe don't even think about firefighters on that day when they're opening up the paper on a Sunday. We've just reinforced to the luxury world why you should think about the firefighter who's working hard at your local fire station, and maybe consider buying a watch that gives back to them.
Yeah, you've actually just prompted me to think about something. Sadly, there are a lot of fires at the moment in LA.
Yeah.
What happens to you when you hear of something along those lines? Because you've got your weeks, your agenda, you've got, I'm sure, your schedules, your office, whether you're as any business person, does it change anything for you?
Yes.
Did you suddenly what was that journey for you when suddenly this awful atrocity is happening in the States?
Straight away we think, how can we help? Mm-hmm. Okay, now you've got to be very careful as a luxury brand as to how you help in such tragedies. What we usually do, and what we're doing for LA, is we produce a one-of-a-kind watch, just one piece, and that piece goes up for auction. To give you an idea, the watch that I'm wearing here usually retails for about $3,000. We produced a one-of-a-kind version of this for the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 that sold for $19,000, and we gave all of the proceeds to the largest 9/11 charity in America. That's the type of thing that we do. So we've made a one-of-a-kind version of our fire exit watch, finished in white and red to match the US fire exit sign. It's going to be auctioned off on February 1st. We're hoping that we raise at least $20,000, and we'll be looking to donate all of those proceeds to a charity that we will speak to firefighters in LA who will tell us whether it is a charity that actually needs it. Because the other thing this is the challenge, isn't it? Because you see all these foundations and organizations and you normally donate to the biggest, but we want to know who are the ones that are actually getting in there and helping rebuild the community. Because also a lot of the celebrity houses have been in the spotlight, but don't forget that LA also has middle class and challenged areas as well, and these houses need to be repaired and fixed too. So straight away when we see things like that, we think, how can we help?
And that's great. I imagine that there's also a challenge where your approach has got to be, this is about what's happening and not about us as a brand, but we have an opportunity to help.
Yeah.
So philanthropy is something I've got a guest in later on in one of these episodes where hopefully we'll be talking about philanthropy in the watch industry, but yours is at the heart of it every time, and it's bittersweet, isn't it? Because you don't want to have to help, but as we it's been all over the news because it has been a big tragedy.
Of course, but it also does, in my opinion, pull a lot of the luxury companies into the spotlight more, because if us as a small family-run watchmaker are donating the sums that we are to the fire industry, what are the big guys doing? Why aren't the big multi-corporates making significant donations into the fire industry? It's really, really sad. And hopefully more corporate companies really try and give back to firefighters, because I'll give you a crazy statistic. The biggest firefighting charity in the UK is called the Firefighters charity. They raise, give or take, about 9 to 11 million pounds in fundraising a year. The RNLI charity, who are volunteers that go out to sea and rescue lives, raise 100 million pounds. So your firefighters, which are on every street corner effectively in Great Britain, are raising 10 times less than the volunteers that go out to sea and save people. It's unbelievable. It should be 10 times more than the RNLI.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because charities need to hire entrepreneurial private sector people who are business orientated, who look at a charity as if it's a business rather than a fundraising platform. We need a board that has a mixture of entrepreneurs, so private and public sector individuals. Now, the challenge that you'll have there, Faye, is charities won't be willing to pay the salaries to these private sector individuals, but they need to look longer term. If you can pay £150,000 to a private sector person to sit on a board of a charity, but they can turn the fundraising from 10 million to 100 million in the next 5 years, would you say it's worth it? Well, to you and I, yes, but to a charity, they might say no, actually, you know?
Because it's the short term, and they don't have the funds to do it in initially, perhaps.
Exactly.
Or the money is needed. When I took some time out and decided what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, I didn't know, but what I evaluated was what I had available to me, and one of the things was time. So I volunteer at the food banks once a week, and I also volunteer with the cancer charity, not on any board level, but for me, what I could contribute outside of anything financially was my time. So, and it is incredibly rewarding. And oddly, there's a real, the biggest contrast between food banks and luxury. I come away every week both saddened and humbled by it all. But I think you're right. There's a huge opportunity in not just our world, for every company to be doing their part, whether it's for a local community or a wider charity but I think it's becoming more important to most corporates, the sustainability piece, and yours already has that written in. It's the fact that all the case melted down from when do you run out? When do you run out of material? Have you done your forecasts?
Yeah, there's plenty of material out there in the world, especially fire hose. There's too much fire hose. Okay, so sadly it's being thrown into landfill. And it doesn't biodegrade. It's just chucked into landfill. We've upcycled the equivalent of 4 Olympic-sized running tracks of fire hose so far, which is a random statistic.
So again, 4 Olympic-sized
running tracks of fire hose is how much we've upcycled into our luxury watch straps.
Who did that math?
Oh, it's quite easy because you get given fire hose in meters, so it's the same imperial metric to an athletics track. The helmets are a little more trickier. We work with antique dealers who actually give us these helmets, but also we can get a lot of watch cases from one helmet anyway. But I do find it funny though that all the way back then, we knew when we started the brand 8 years ago that sustainability, charity, and having a USP were really important things. And now, 8 years on, these are the things that are sort of the hot topics, excuse the pun, hot topics. But that was like our modus operandi from the beginning, you know?
Well, it's again credit to you and the brand and what you're doing, that it wasn't something that you added in after because you felt you had to, or it would enhance the brand or elevate it in any way.
It's the worst when you see that, isn't it? It just gets chucked in a few years later.
It's a tick box exercise from somebody in a boardroom somewhere going, right, what are we missing? Why are they doing better? It's because of that.
Exactly.
And it happens, it's which I suppose leads me on to my next question. In the watch industry, so not specifically to the to firefighting, what changes would you most like to see?
I think philanthropy is a huge point, isn't it? But philanthropy, as we say, with purpose. Because you see, I think there's an expression that people use which is called greenwashing, where you say you're sustainable, but you're not actually doing the steps to be as sustainable as possible. Now, what I will say to that is, the luxury industry is very difficult to be fully sustainable because, let's be honest, in the watch industry, we're using raw commodities that are mined out the ground, flown thousands of miles with a massive carbon footprint. But if you can do what you can to be sustainable and then also give back and give good sums back as well to people that are actually highly aligned to the brand. And I think when you have a general luxury watch company that don't really know what they stand for, it's literally like, what's the flavor of the month this month, It's like, what's the tragedy that's just happened or hot? Let's do that. And then the next quarter, let's do that topic. Let's do that topic. And I think the brands that I really appreciate are the ones that really stand by what they're...
sustainable in their sustainability.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And they have a bandwidth and they stay within that bandwidth. So I'd like to see more philanthropy with purpose. I think I'd like to see more independence pushing it further as well.
That's what I was going to ask about perception from some of the larger retailers or the larger independents on independent brands.
Yeah.
So does one hold back on the other?
Definitely.
Or is one,
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's lovely to see that sort of the luxury retailers are coming into this space and appreciating independent watchmaking and stocking independent watchmakers. But at the same time, it's very, very difficult to get those conversations started. And I think what the industry needs to realize as well is that the independent watch space is becoming a very, very popular place. Once you've got your sort of grail watches in your collection, you then start to collect for fun. You're not looking for the future appreciation value. And also, from a security standpoint, you don't really want to be wearing a very expensive watch as your daily beater. So then you can sort of drop down the price point and you can buy something out of the love of it rather than the future appreciation value. So I'd like to see more of the bigger luxury players coming into the independent space and actually giving us a platform to be stocked with them and give us a showcase or be on panels and presentations, etc. I think that would be really cool.
I think, yeah, perhaps my question was leading because that's what I think I wanted to hear from you. But because I came from the other side where we were part of that retail team that wasn't always able to give the small independent brands the space that they wanted. I really liked what you said about the risk element. We are facing a lot of that, particularly in the UK. We see it in some other sort of big cities about people can't wear their premium watches. It's become quite a challenging time. I was talking about it earlier. We're here actually in Woodbury House. Steve Sully has been kind enough to let us use his studio for this interview, and we'll be getting a few moments with him later. We were talking about collections and the challenges of, because we're in Mayfair and some of those challenges. And going back to your point with some of the with your product, and it's not dismissive of the price point. I'm anti in our industry several things. One, how disgusting it's become where you can't wear something that you've worked hard for or you've inherited or you've been saving up for, and even if it's not that much of a value of you personally, just the risk element. I'm really struggling with that to the point where a lot of people can't necessarily wear the watches that they'd love to wear. I think you hit the nail on the head about wearing something because you love it, not because of the price it might, the appreciation. And it's where people know the price of everything but the value of nothing. That for me has resonated quite a lot in recent years with the products that we work with and with luxury watches, because you know what the retail price is, but the value to everybody is very, very different. I've not necessarily been in a position to buy high-end watches throughout my entire career, but I have a real appreciation for the ones that I do have because they mean a lot to me.
Exactly.
And
you have to save hard to get them as well, you know.
And at the cost of something else.
Exactly.
It's never. It's I've been very privileged, as we both are, because this goes back to that community piece and the charity element, in that it puts things in a lot of perspective when you can set your daily tasks or go about your day and have and recognise the relevance.
But I think it's a difficult world that we live in now as well, Faye, where if you want to treat yourself to something nice, it sometimes feels difficult to actually wear it in public anymore, you know, because of how you're going to be labelled or how you're going to be seen. And going back to what I said earlier, I've always been a very private person anyway. And we do live in a world as well, let's be honest, where you jump on social media and you are battered by that young individual who's got the yacht, the car, and it's just in your face. And I think it's caused a bit of a jealousy and an envy as well in the world, because let's be honest, 99% of the world as well have great jobs in something which maybe isn't flying around the world and doing this and that. And these are really, really important jobs. And I think this is the challenge that we live in at the minute.
Oh, absolutely. Are they happy though, those young people with yachts and cars?
I don't think so.
And what to know?
Well, I wouldn't say they're happy. I think as well, money that comes fast can be lost even quicker, you know, and that's one of the challenges. There's almost a beauty in building something sustainably over time, and taking your time with it and having patience. It just makes you a more grounded individual rather than one of these flashy purple Lamborghini flashing lights underneath.
It's potentially sitting outside here.
Possibly, yeah.
Which would have been, your grandfather would have been really proud of that, because that would have been the
I'm sure.
The core of this is what was important to him.
Definitely.
The price range that your brand sits in, starting point at £800 up to £4,000. Your competition isn't just other luxury products. And this speaks to the point also of sort of the envy piece, or just security. You could spend that money on an incredible experience.
Yeah.
So you've got a competition in so many different areas. But one thing, when we last met, you told me about what's he called?
He's going to be called Billy, the fire engine.
Okay, I wanted to know a little bit more about, but I think what you do with the watch when you sell these watches, because I think you're going to be, I want you to tell me properly, because I'm obviously a bit hesitant, but it goes to the experience. And I think that, again, when you buy a William Wood, when you're talking about it with your friends, or when you're you're not just buying a watch or something that you just bought online. I'm really conscious of running out of time. We're going to have to meet again. But there's
an experience.
Yeah, there's an experience, and that stays with you as long as the watch will. So tell us, we've talked about where you've come from, and where you are now. Where are you going? Where's the brand going?
For sure.
Include all of these beautiful elements, because they just make me smile.
Thank you. Okay, so the vision is basically to convert a closed fire station into our head office and concept store, where you'll walk in. It will have all of the original ornate features of the fire station. All of our employees will be wearing upcycled fire hose aprons. There'll be a watchmaker in the corner where you'll be able to see our upcycling in action, fire hose turning into fire hose straps. 100-year-old British brass firefighters helmets melting down into our watch cases. When you buy a watch from the counter, we'll go upstairs, we'll go to the storeroom and come down the firefighters pole. And when you actually, it's going to be fun. And when you make payment, there'll be a big old salvaged fire bell over the counter that you'll ring, and we'll all celebrate when you ring the bell and become part of the William Wood family. Parked out front, we're going to be salvaging a 1950s fire engine. So you'll lift the shutters in the back, and revealed in the back will be glass with suede cushions, and our watches illuminated in the back of the 1950s.
I did a complete disservice by calling it a bus. Bus
engine?
No, it's very much a fire engine.
Well, the terminology in the fire industry is an appliance. They call it, get the appliance out. And we will drive that fire engine, which my grandfather was called William Wood, but his nickname when he was a firefighter was Billy. So it'll be called Billy the Fire Engine, and it'll drive the length and breadth of the UK, promoting our watches. So we will actually come to a city near you. We'll pull up in a city centre. You'll be able to see our watches on display, but we'll also raise money for firefighters in that local area when we have the watches on display as well. And this is the beauty of what I see, Faye, because everyone's always like, would you ever sell the company? And my answer is, I don't think so. But where I'm going with this is, the vision of what I've got can be as big or as small as I want to make it. Because if this was owned by a big conglomerate, you could have a fire station on Fifth Avenue in New York, a fire station in Hong Kong, a fire station in Sydney, a fire station next to the Dubai World Trade Center, you know? And all of these converted fire stations could literally be a meeting area and an experience where you talk about watches, relax in the fire station and buy a William Wood watch. You could literally have fire engines running around cities with our branding on the side. And the reason I say that is because our vision could be massive, but it really just depends on how far I want to take it. So that is my vision for the company in Britain, but it could easily go internationally. Because bearing in mind, the US is actually our biggest market now. So about 52% of all of our revenues are based in the US, followed by the UK, Canada, Australia, and then the UAE. So these are all important demographics for our company. And I think something else, even when you buy one of our watches, you say the word experience. You just have to read our Trustpilot reviews, and you'll see that buying a William Wood watch is an experience. I mean, if you see here, like literally this is a fire alarm presentation box, you know? So you've got 3 cushions inside. It says break glass, press here. And as soon as you open it, you'll actually get a smell of the smokiness from the red fire hose strap that comes out because it's being used in real fires. Where can you share that kind of experience with any other watch brand in the industry?
From everything from your marketing to your product to the production, expansion, you haven't overlooked anything, have you?
No.
Every element has is ties back to the credibility of what you're trying to do.
Everything. Literally everything. And you have to also try and create a camaraderie and a community as well. Something that we're about to introduce is fire hose strap keepers.
Talk me through that, please.
So we have a very big retirement gifting business where, let's say you've done 25 years in the fire service. We've created this new technology where it's a silicon base that slides over the hose strap here, and then in here is a pop in, pop out stainless steel plate to match this case, or bronze plate to match our bronze watches. And you can add a personalized engraving to it that tells you, because when you're a firefighter, you normally get a wall-mounted axe when you retire, and it tells you your time in and time out of the fire service.
So again, detail back to
everything,
part of
everything.
You're probably one of the world's authority, aren't you?
Yeah,
not on watchmaking.
It's a good point to say that.
You would be. You would be.
I think so.
I'm just conscious of time. I've got 2 really quick last questions, if I may. For the 10th anniversary, if you've got billies around the world, I reckon you need to have them all ringing their bell at the same time.
That'd be wicked,
somewhere globally.
That'd be pretty cool.
We
might wake somebody up though if it's like 2 a.m. in one country. Ding, 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 ding.
It's nothing wrong with that.
Who cares?
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
It's like it's about getting the name out there. What are you most proud of to date?
I think I'm most proud of being able to every day run a company that has never once felt like a job a day in my life, that has a significant impact on the world, and that gives back to the very people that my grandfather was all those years ago. And we even donate back to a charity that helped my grandfather recuperate when he picked up an injury in the fire service. So it's crazy to think that all these years later, almost 40 years later, we're giving back to a job and a career that he gave so much to, you know?
Gosh, that's wonderful. And finally, what are you most excited about?
I honestly believe that there is just such certainty that one day our company will just be recognized as a significant player in the luxury watch space. I can't see anything getting in our way. Like I just really can't see it. So I think just what I'm most excited about is one day seeing the smile on people's faces as they walk into these fire stations. Imagine, man, just a kid like holding his dad's hand or coming in on his shoulders, just ringing that bell in the fire station and thinking that decades earlier it was me talking to my pal in a Wetherspoons in Hexham, breaking down in tears in my family's home, and then just giving it 6-0 for like 20 odd years to then having that kind of impact. I think that's what I'm most excited about.
That's a lot to be excited about.
For sure.
Jonny, it is always a pleasure to see you. Last time we met, we were in New York looking at a fire hose, a fire extinguisher on a wall, thinking about the negative space, the blank space above it, and what a great place it would be to stock some of your watches where no other brands would even consider being near.
Exactly.
And I thought it was great. So every time I speak to you, there's something interesting, funny. I learn a lot from you. Your brand is emotive, it's visceral, it's significant. You're doing a fantastic job within the industry, and it's cross-function with a really important with the firefighters globally. I can't believe you've only been doing this for 8 years. I'm so excited to see where you're going to go. I can't thank you enough for meeting with me today, and I really, really look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Faye. Very kind. We appreciate it. Yeah.